Hello everyone, this is Baldy Chris and I'm doing another hour of Instant Indie. This time we're moving on to Dear Esther, the Landmark edition no less. This is now part of the Instant Indie bundle number 4, and I'll give you a price recap. The price for the bundle on PlayStation Store is $24.99. And with the individual games within it, there's Dear Esther is available at $7.99, Hugh is available at $11.99, and In the Flame and the Flood is also available at $11.99 as well. So probably time to get stuck in.
Dear Esther, I have lost track of how long I have been here, and how many visits I have made overall. Certainly the landmarks are now so familiar to me that I have to remind myself to actually see the forms and shapes in front of me. I could stumble blind across these rocks, the edges of these precipices, without fear of missing my step and plummeting down to sea. Besides, I have always considered that if one is to fall, it is critical to keep one's eyes firmly open.
Okay, so I have seen this before. I was playing at a friend's house and I've got a running joke with him that he finds ways to die that in situations where you just wouldn't think it was possible to do. But this is one of them. And there's actually a trophy for doing it as well. So that was one of the quickest trophies I've ever seen him get. Now, as you can see, the game looks beautiful, and also has a beautiful soundtrack to it as well. It's not necessarily conventionally what you would actually call a game. Maybe the toilet doesn't look beautiful. But yeah, essentially the game is all about exploration and it telling you a story. We've got what looks like some kind of chemical formula there. Probably ethanol, that I think. You know, there's no pickups to be done. There are collections after a fashion. Those collections being triggering narration points. And there's a lot of narration in the game. If you manage to trigger all the narratives, you will get a trophy for it. But this isn't really a game for trophy hunters, I wouldn't have said. And it's probably fair to call it an experience more so than a game.
There was once talk of a wind farm out here, away from the rage and the intolerance of the masses. The sea, they said, is too rough for the turbines to stand. They clearly never came here to experience the becalming for themselves. Personally, I would have supported it. Turbines would be a fitting contemporary refuge for a hermit. The revolution and the permanence.
I have found the ship's manifest, crumpled and waterlogged under a stash of paint cans. It tells me that along with this present cargo, there was a large quantity of antacid yogurt bound for the European market. It must have washed out to sea. God knows there are no longer gulls or goats here to eat it.
Okay, so I don't think I can actually cross this stream. There isn't a jump button or anything similar like to that. It is literally just walking around as the movement you can do. So I appear to have run out of landscape to explore in that direction. But yeah, I find this game, or this experience, quite out of character with pretty much every one of the other titles in the collection that I've looked at so far, in that they were all very definitely gamey. A few of them have been ones that you could have a real concentrated burst out, a few short, sharp hits at the game, and this really isn't like that. This is essentially one where you want to set aside a little bit of time for. I believe speedrunners have completed it in 17 minutes, but it's not really about speedrunning. More just finding out everything that the island has to offer and all the backstory for the narrator, which is a pretty sad story, which will become more and more apparent as this little journey goes on. Didn't actually mean to do that. There is also a trophy for dying from falling as well, to further reward my friend and his ability to find video game death in places where you just don't expect to find it. So let's head back up those stairs again. You can zoom in the view, but you can't make the character walk any faster. In fact, basically every button I press is just a zoom button. It's the shoulder buttons, the triggers, or the square, circle, square, circle, X and triangle buttons, they're all just zooming in. So instead of slipping down the cliff, let's walk up the cliff path. Actually see an artificial light up there, blinking away.
Donnelly's book had not been taken out from the library since 1974. I decided it would never be missed as I slipped it under my coat and avoided the librarian's gaze on the way out. If the subject matter is obscure, the writer's literary style is even more so. It is not the text of a stable or trustworthy reporter. Perhaps it is fitting that my only companion in these last days should be a stolen book written by a dying man. When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff paths died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this: to keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh. Come back.
There we are. There was the other trophy for dying. Thankfully it has put me back exactly where I was. It was quite a long walk to get up there. I was looking around for quite a bit trying to see the parallel lines scratched on the cliff, but there they are. There. But yeah, the sound and the graphics are very good. You could very much believe that you were walking along this rugged, windswept path.
You and I. We feel no particular need to turn back. There's nothing to be seen if we did. No tired old man parting the cliffs with his arms. No gifts or Bibles laid out on the sand for the taking. No tides turning or the shrieking gulls overhead. The bones of the hermit are no longer laid out for the taking. I have stolen them away to the guts of this island, where the passages all run to black, and where we can light each other's faces by their strange luminescence. Dear Esther, I met Paul. I made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life. I would leave you presents outside your retreat in this interim space between cliff and beach. I would leave you loaves and fishes, but the fish stocks have been depleted and I've run out of bread. I would row you back to your homeland in a bottomless boat, but I fear we would both be driven mad by the chatter of the sea creatures.
I don't think I missed a turning in that cave. Seemed to be just a little circular diversion. From what I can gather about this game, it was put together by students, and as such I think it's intended more to be, I don't know, a final year project or a tech demo or something along those lines rather than an actual game. And yeah, I do find it a little surprising that it's being marketed as a game and being bundled up with some of the other titles that it has been bundled up by.
He still maintains he wasn't drunk, but tired. I can't make the judgment or the distinction anymore. I was drunk when I landed here, and tired too. I walked up the cliff path in near darkness and camped in the bay where the trawler lies beached. It was only at dawn that I saw the bothy and decided to make my temporary lodgings there. I was expecting just the aerial and a transmitter stashed in a weatherproof box somewhere on the mount. It had an air of uneasy permanence to it. Like all the other buildings here, erosion seems to have evaded it completely.
So I think that's where I walked to earlier and couldn't climb up.
Come back.
I did not mean to do that, so... I feel like I need to emphasise when I say it's a friend of mine that manages to die in silly ways in video games. It is genuinely a friend, it's not just me making excuses for myself, although I've now fallen off the cliff twice when I didn't mean to. Don't know if I can still walk down this path. I can. There we are. Oh, and I got a trophy for doing that. That's called Donnelly, I think, if I'm seeing it right. Struggling to read some of the text on my
I
telly.
have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times. But although I have all the reports and all the witnesses, and have cross-referenced them within a millimetre using my Ordnance Survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
So there, we seem to find a pretty crucial point in the narrator's backstory. That his wife Esther appears to have been killed in a motorway accident by someone from Wolverhampton. See a pretty bleak backdrop. Obviously we're not on the M5 or in Wolverhampton at the minute. There was reference earlier to a bothy, which is a remote Scottish hut. So I think this is somewhere on I don't know if it's supposed to be a real island, but a very remote, rugged, uninhabited island. Formerly inhabited island, I should say. Sort of place that most of us just wouldn't have any experience of. There appears to be a light blinking out in the bay there.
There must be a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived?
So if you're wondering what happened to your Amazon parcels, that's where they are.
I've begun to wonder if Donnelly's voyage here was as prosaic as it was presented. How disappointed not to have found the bones of the holy man. No wonder he hated the inhabitants so. To him they must have seemed like barnacles mindlessly clinging to a mercy seat. Why cling so hard to the rock? Because it is the only thing that stops us from sliding into the ocean. Into oblivion.
So I thought I was going to be able to walk round to where the lines had been carved into the cliff face there, but apparently not. I think this is more or less where I came into this area. Yeah, I'd have gone down that way. So I'll try heading towards the red light. See what else there is to explore. Okay. That must be where the loading screen started from. So there must be some kind of turning point that I've missed somewhere along here. Certainly not a game that gives you any real guidance on what to do. It is, some might call it a walking simulator, but yeah, just about exploration, and it becomes apparent that, you know, there's a distinct route that should be followed, although I don't appear to have found it. Don't think you can get up there. No, you can't. Don't know if maybe there's a cave or something that I've missed. Not a cave really, so much as just a valley I can
had
walk
kidney
down.
stones, and you visited me in the hospital. After the operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk.
Oh, pardon me, I just sneezed.
When I first looked into the shaft, I swear I felt the stones in my stomach shift in recognition.
Don't know exactly what you would recognise that as, other than a big hole in the ground. Is that a bothy? I guess it is.
I've begun my ascent on the green slope of the western side. I've looked deep into the mountain from the shaft and understood that I must go up and then find the way under. I will stash the last vestiges of my civilization in the stone walls and work deeper from there. I'm drawn by the aerial and the cliff edge. There is some form of rebirth waiting for me there.
I don't remember if you're supposed to fall into the shaft or not. From what was just being said and the fact that I can climb up here and new narratives were being triggered, I imagine probably not. On the other hand, there's a big hole in the ground. There, somewhere. And I feel it would be a little rude not to plummet into it.
Come back.
Okay, so that is not the correct route to take. In case you should be wondering. Let's clamber back up past the bothy and do as the narrator suggested, head upwards, and he talks about the aerial. Can't actually see the aerial in its red light at the moment. There it is up there.
The bothy was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jakobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either.
Okay, let's have a little look at the bothy. Oh, we are kind of in it. It's very ramshackle. And someone's been going mad, painting weird symbols everywhere.
Three cormorants seen at dusk. They did not land. This house built of stone, built by a long-dead shepherd. Contents: my camp bed, a stove, a table, chairs, my clothes, my books. The caves that score out the belly of this island, leaving it famished. My limbs and belly famished. This skin, these organs, this failing eyesight. When the battery runs out in my torch, I will descend into the caves and follow only the phosphorescence home.
Looks like a little can of some kind. Maybe it's for a dead sheepdog or something. Don't actually seem to be able to clamber up any further there. Might in fact be that I need to head downwards again. He did talk of caves after all. Wind howling. You'd want to get in the cave for a bit of shelter.
Jakobsen's ribcage, they told Donnelly, was deformed, the result of some birth defect or perhaps a traumatic injury as a child. Brittle and overblown it was, and desperately light. Perhaps it was this that finally did for him, unable to contain the shattering of his heart. In half-light, his skeleton a discarded prop, a false and calcified seabird.
Well, I don't know if there was literally a skeleton and a ribcage around just now, but I certainly missed it if there were.
They found Jakobsen in early spring. The thaw had only just come. Even though he'd been dead nearly 7 months, his body had been frozen right down to the nerves and had not even begun to decompose. All around him small flowers were reaching for the weak sun. The goats had adjusted happily to life without a shepherd and were grazing freely about the valley. Donnelly reports they hurled the body in fear and disgust down the shaft, but I cannot corroborate this story.
Well, if there is a big hole, it's easier than digging a grave, isn't it? Who's gonna know? Got stuck in this little boat wreck.
Climbing down to the caves, I slipped and fell and have injured my leg. I think the femur is broken. It is clearly infected. The skin has turned a bright, tight pink, and the pain is crashing in on waves, winter tides against my shoreline, drowning out the ache of my stones. I struggled back to the bothy to rest, but it has become clear that there is only one way this is likely to end. The medical supplies I looted from the trawler have suddenly found their purpose. They will keep me lucid for my final ascent.
Well, he talks about ascent, but I can't actually go up. So, I think it's time for a plummet. And this time round, it was a plummet I was meant to do. There's another trophy there for Jakobsen.
Donnelly's addiction is my one true constant. Even though I wake in false dawns and find the landscape changing, flowing in constantly through my tears, I know his reaching is always upon me.
Quite a plummet, given the guy already had a broken femur before he did it. Okay, if you're wondering what happened there, my controller battery just ran out very suddenly, which seemed to put on a vast turn of speed compared to what I've been managing up to that point. And then just pirouetting on the spot, so I think I just came up here. Looks like there's a path leading back as well, and probably just a little...
They'd stopped the traffic back as far as the Sanford Junction and come up the hard shoulder like radio signals from another star. It took 21 minutes for them to arrive. I watched Paul time it to the second on his watch.
Yeah, a little circuit with a bit of narration in it about this very non-cheery accident. But yes, I think the island that we're on is where Esther grew up, and for some reason the narrator has decided after her untimely passing that he needs to go visit this scrappy rock in wherever it is, the North Sea or the Irish Sea. Not 100% clear which coast it is, but time for another plummet, I think. There we are. I think the island almost looks prettier on the inside. Slightly more hospitable, just. Very well lit considering how far underground one must be.
If the caves are my guts, this must be the place where the stones are first formed. The bacteria phosphoresce and rise, singing through the tunnels. Everything here is bound by the rise and fall, like a tide. Perhaps the whole island is actually underwater.
Okay, I think I might have seen this from a different vantage point a little earlier
I will
on.
hold the hand you offered to me.
Or maybe
From
not.
the summit down to this well, into the dark waters where the small flowers creep for the sun. Headlights are reflected in your retinas, moonlit in the shadow of the crematorium chimney.
I feel like there was a bit of the caves back there that led to essentially a T-junction. So I'm left wondering what would have been down the other route, because it looked just as much of a viable route as the one I'm taking. Okay, so I guess I'm going to have to go wading. Or swimming. Seems less drowny than when I walked off the slipway at the very beginning of the video. Guess it's time to plummet again. I don't think you need any prize. Well, you're not going to get any prizes for guessing what we're seeing here, or which motorway might be marked on that sign. I imagine there's somewhere I can get out here. This looks like it. Okay, and another trophy popped there. That was for Esther. So I can't remember how many of these chapters of the game that there actually are. It's not impossible. They'll actually get to the end of the game within the hour or close to the hour. It's not a huge game. Whether it's got replay value or not, I don't know.
I wish I could have known Donnelly in this place. We would have had so much to debate. Did he paint these stones or did I? Who left the pots in the hut by the jetty? Who formed the museum under the sea? Who fell silently to his death into the frozen waters? Who erected this godforsaken aerial in the first place? Did this whole island rise to the surface of my stomach, forcing the gulls to take flight?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if there's replay value attached to trying to trigger all the audio narration points. As I say, I'm sure there's a couple of places where I've taken one turn where another was an option, which probably leads to eventually a dead end, but a few more narrations along the way.
We shall begin to assemble our own version of the North Shore. We will scrawl in dead languages and electrical diagrams and hide them away for future theologians to muse and mumble over. We will send a letter to Esther Donnelly and demand her answer. We will mix the paint with ashes and tarmac and the glow from our infections. We will paint a moon over the Sanford Junction and blue lights falling like stars along the hard shoulder.
Is that a computer that's been left there as a kind of shrine. Is any of this what Esther would have wanted? Well, we'll just never know. This is a route or just a painting. Just a painting, apparently.
By the roadside, by the exit for Damascus, all ticking and cooled, all feathers and remorse, all of these signals routed like traffic through the circuit diagrams of our guts, those badly written boats torn bottomless in the swells, washing us forever ashore.
It seems like there was 3 victims of the accident altogether. Esther, who passed away, obviously. The narrator, her husband, who's...
From here, I can see my armada. I collected all the letters I'd ever meant to send to you, if I'd have ever made it to the mainland, but had instead collected at the bottom of my rucksack, and I spread them out along the lost beach. Then I took each and every one, and I folded them into boats. I folded you into the creases, and then, as the sun was setting, I set the fleet to sail. Shattered into 21 pieces, I consigned you to the Atlantic, and I sat here until I'd watched all of you sink.
So yes, the narrator, an obvious victim, but also Paul, the one responsible for the accident, whether it was tiredness or drunkenness, appears to have had his life changed fairly irrevocably since then as well. So yeah, it's quite a melancholy game all round, really.
When Paul keeled over dead on the road to Damascus, they resuscitated him by hitting him in the chest with stones gathered by the roadside. He was lifeless for 21 minutes, certainly long enough for the oxygen levels in his brain to have decreased and caused hallucinations and delusions of transcendence. I'm running out of painkillers, and the moon has become almost unbearably bright. I've begun my voyage in a paper boat without a bottom. I will fly to the moon in it. I've been folded along a crease in time, a weakness in the sheet of life. Now you've settled on the opposite side of the paper to me. I can see your traces in the ink that soaks through the fiber, the pulped vegetation. When we become waterlogged and the cage disintegrates, we will intermingle. When this paper aeroplane leaves the cliff edge and carves parallel vapor trails in the dark, we will come together. If only Donnelly had experienced this, he would have realized he was his own shoreline, as am I. Just as I am becoming this island, so he became his syphilis, retreating into the burning synapses, the stones, the infection.
Hello there, Dancer Baracle. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. This sounds like you're adding to the overall poetry of the experience, but one of a slightly more man-pig relationship than the one being depicted by the game.
Bent back like a nail, like a hangnail, like a drowning man clung onto the wheel, drunk and spiraled, washed onto the lost shore under a moon as fractured as a shattered wing. We cleave, we are flight and suspended, these wretched painkillers, this form inconstant. I will take flight, I will take flight.
So do you get to share your bestiality poetry with everybody streaming on Twitch, or am I the lucky chosen one?
I have dredged these waters for the bones of the hermit, for the traces of Donnelly, for any sign of Jakobsen's flock, for the empty bottle that would incriminate him. I have scoured this stretch of motorway 21 times, attempting to recreate his trajectory. A point when his heart stopped dead and all he saw was the moon over the Sanford Junction. He was not drunk, Esther. He was not drunk at all, and it was not his fault. It was the converging lines that doomed him. This is not a recorded natural condition. The gulls do not fly so low over the motorway and cause him to swerve. The paint scored away from his car in lines like an infection, making directly for the heart. I have run out of places to climb. I will abandon this body and take to the air. Dear Esther, I have burnt my belongings, my books, this death certificate. Mine will be written all across this island. Who was Jakobsen? Who remembers him? Donnelly has written of him, but who was Donnelly? Who remembers him? I have painted, carved, hewn, scored into this space all that I could draw from him. There will be another to these shores to remember me. I will rise from the ocean like an island without bottom, come together like a stone, become an aerial, a beacon, that they will not forget you. We have always been drawn here. One day the gulls will return and nest in our bones and our history. I will look to my left and see Esther Donnelly flying beside me. I will look to my right and see Paul Jakobsen flying beside me. They will leave white lines carved into the air to reach the mainland, where help will be sent.
Okay, and in case that wasn't obvious, as soon as I got to the foot of the aerial, it went onto autopilot for the entirety of the climb up and the dive stroke flight down from it again. Um, and there's a trophy there for Paul as well. So there we are. That is Dear Esther, an hour of instant indie. I didn't think I'd actually get the entire game done when I saw it being played by my friend before. He's a bit slower and more methodical about his exploration of places, so it certainly took longer than an hour when he was doing that. But yeah, there we go. It's quite an unusual game, if indeed it is even a game. And yeah, it's a distinct anomaly among the rest of the instant indie bundle, but I think it's an interesting experience. Like I say, not necessarily any great level of replay value to it. If indeed play is even the right verb. But yeah, anyway, that's it for me for another hour of Instant Indie. I'll be back with another episode imminently with Hugh, which is very much more a game-like, and one of the ones actually that I'd heard of from the Instant Indie bundles before I got them, was quite interested in it, just in its own rights. So that will be an interesting episode when we get to that one. But thank you for watching. I've had a few viewers pop in. If you've liked what you've seen, follow me on Twitch to catch the rest of the series, and I'll be happy to follow you back. Or head over to YouTube and look under the username BaldyChris, where you'll be able to see the entire series so far, and like and subscribe and do all that good stuff over on YouTube. That would be lovely. But that's it for this one. So thank you, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.